So I'm the other extreme of our good friends at Marriott. I am the small 14-hotel, modern luxury company, little hotel company, and a very proud one at that. So there's a couple of things that I wanted to sort of bubble up today, and that's, there's two lines in our ideology. The first one is, we're hosts first and always. And the second is, we're unabashed provocateurs. So what I'd like to share with you is a little bit about the bigger thinking that sits around mobile and not just mobile itself. For good reason, because I don't have a lot of the clever stuff that my colleagues have spoken about, which is fabulous, by the way. So I'm going to start with what you can see in front of you, which is somewhat of a plea and an opening admission. No, I'm not an alcoholic. But I do want to start off by saying, we don't have an app. We don't. And I'm okay with that. And there's a very good reason why we don't have that today. Do we have a mobile strategy? Absolutely. But I'm going to talk about what I believe to be the bigger picture that sits around what we need to do to be successful. And it's not so dissimilar to what you've already heard, but served up from the other extreme of the small guy. So starting off with defining a term, it's something we didn't do, and I want to do it just to make sure we're all sort of looking at this and thinking about this in the same way. So we talk about the term mobile, and mobile is very broad. And really, it's any number of devices that people have on their person that they use to interact and engage with a brand or another person or an entity. So I've thrown up there three examples. You've got the tablet, you've got the mobile phone, you've got the little watch there, the smart watch, but I could go on. There's the glasses, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really important to get this term right. I was thinking it through. Suddenly, the evolution of man came into my head. You're really thinking she's weird. And it was a weird moment, but as I started to think through what was going on, I was like, okay, so everything's getting smaller, really, as we start going towards nanotechnology, isn't it? So we started off with the big clunky, and in our interaction, these devices that we're talking about that enable so much of really what we want to achieve is getting smaller and smaller, but it's getting faster and faster. And we talk about being responsive, and I actually think we need to go into rapid responsiveness, okay? So responsive website's great, but it goes way beyond that. And then you think about the evolution of man. Well, what happened was we started small and we got bigger and bigger and bigger and we stood upright. And it's just something that stuck in my mind, and I thought, okay, so we're sort of moving in a different direction in terms of our thinking, and we're thinking small, and we're thinking about how we interact on what is a decreasing share of visual space in some regards. So I see it as a means to an end. At Viceroy, our mobile strategy really is an enabler. It's an enabler to something that goes way, way beyond the device itself. And you touched upon it earlier, and that's engagement. It's really about doing the simple things brilliantly and being able to touch people at any point in their journey with you. But I'm going to say, and this is where the plea comes in, we actually fail at that today as an industry. We really are. I'd love to say that we're as great as Zappos in customer engagement and experience, or that we've got the booking experience down to be as quick and easy as Amazon, but we haven't. So here we are now talking about some really interesting opportunities with mobile that at its core is about engagement. But we haven't even been able to solve how to answer the telephone properly today. So the hoteliers in the room will know that when they speak to their call centers today, and yes, voice may be decreasing. In fact, some organizations, it went back up. Mobile drove the click-to-call volumes back up. We still have a leaky bucket there. We can't even answer the phone for every single guest. If you look at the abandonment rates, you look at what we're not converting in one of the oldest, most old-fashioned touch points of our industry. So that's problem number one. And I can go on, and it goes across our industry, across the various touch points. So our viewpoint is that if we aren't really getting the simple things done properly, should we be racing towards out-clevering ourselves right now? Because we really need to understand, how do we get to know that guest? And that isn't going to be through a loyalty program. Because as time goes on, and loyalty was really the initial basis for a database, And if you ask most companies, the reason they have them is so that they can get to know their guests and their customers better. But there's also a new group of consumers who don't want to be part of those programs anymore. So we have to know how they operate. We have to understand them and know how to reach them. So mobile, for us, is an enabler. We see it working across three pillars, and you've already heard a lot about that through the Marriott presentation, and it really is no different from our perspective. You'll be pleased to hear. So actually, before I get into this, I just want to poll the room, because there's a lot of technology companies here. How many people in this room have actually purchased a hotel experience through a mobile device? And I'm going to include tablet, that was greater than $10,000 in value and was your annual holiday or your annual vacation with your family or friends? One hand, thank you. You're brave, very brave, thank you. I think it's quite telling, isn't it? And I've got to put some context around this question. I operate in the luxury end of the market. So I have guests who are spending anything between $1,000 a night for a hotel room, in some cases up to $15,000 and $25,000 a night for a hotel room. They have very particular expectations. They need a lot from us and from me personally when they're going to engage with us. I have to ask myself, can I suitably do that today through any of the mobile touch points that I have available? I have to ask myself, if they want to do business with me in that way, we have to sell the way customers want to buy. So, which takes me back to my earlier statement about doing the simple things brilliantly. Now, the fact that only one hand went up is quite telling for me and where I operate at the luxury end of the spectrum. People, you fight hard. If I talk about, again, our brand. We fight hard for share of screen space. And we also have to accept that if people don't know you, maybe the first time they're trying your brand, they need more information. Are they really going to default to have that immersive experience that they're expecting for an expenditure of $10,000 or $15,000 or $25,000 for something that they've looked forward to an entire year? That will require more than potentially a small screen. So I think that the points made about engagement can't be underestimated. So we've got to get that right. So let's look at the three pillars. You've got service, you've got transaction, and you've got operations. So servicing, we've seen a lot. We've seen a great video. Yes, guests do want to interact with us. We've got to service them pre, during, post their trip. We've also got to make sure that the operational pieces that support that servicing are ready, okay? And I'd love to know how Marriott have evolved their operational framework so that they can support chat in real time. Because it used to be, when you came into a hotel and you needed something, you might go up to a colleague or go to a front desk or a concierge, and you'd wait your turn, wouldn't you? Well, what the mobile infrastructure has done is it's allowed our guests to have multiple conversations with our colleagues, literally on top of each other. So if you had to put it into old world terms, it's like standing at a front desk with 5 people in front of you, all in a line. Can you do this for me, this for me, this for me, this for me, all at once? So operationally, we have to reinvent ourselves. It's not just a front end about the technology. And I make this point because at the end, I'm going to make a follow-up plea to all of the technology organizations and vendors in the room. Transactions, this is an interesting one when you're in luxury for the reasons I mentioned earlier. So I can tell you today that 60% of our traffic still comes through desktop and 30% is coming through the mobile phone. Actually, less comes through tablet for us. So the 60% is 85% of my revenue. The 30%, which is mobile phone, is just 6% of my revenue. Because still a very large number of my customers and my guests are trying my brand for the first time and therefore have questions, but going back to the earlier point, have needs beyond that can be currently serviced through mobile devices today. And the piece across the top in this example with the iPad is really just that there is the engagement. The engagement piece has to sit all the way around. Operationally, yes, there are huge, huge opportunities for our industry. I think the door locks, the key in the cloud is an obvious one. But that does require investment. And as anybody in this room knows, if you are a management company, having those conversations can be a challenge. And I'll come on to talk about that. It does save $1 a piece. Great, there's an ROI on that. It's probably one of the few ROIs we can actually get to at the moment. And I think it's a topic that warrants further discussion for this panel. So let me now touch upon some of the barriers, as we see it as a small luxury brand. The first one is that engagement piece again. I'm still not convinced as an industry we really understand the problems we're solving for our guests. And I often ask my team this. I say, what problem are you solving? And my salespeople look at me blankly and say, well, selling them a hotel room. And actually, we're not selling people a hotel room. That's what we are not doing. So if you think about most people in the world, if you ask them the question, they'll give you an answer. But they're not going to tell you the underlying latent needs, the psychology of what they're really wanting as an output. So think about a business traveler who needs a hotel room to stay for the night. And the reason why they're traveling is because they have a very, very important presentation to make the next day that's really a career-defining moment for them. What do they need to be? They need to be successful, don't they? They want to get up on that stage and be successful. So when you ask somebody what's the reason for your travel, what's the problem we're solving for you, it's not a comfortable bed. It's, I'm looking for a brand to ensure that when I get on that stage in the morning, I'm successful. No one ever asked the customer if they wanted a flatbed in business on an aircraft. They actually co-created this, and it came out of a session where somebody stood up one day and said, I'm fed up of getting to the other end on a transatlantic flight when I get off in London and feeling like I can't manage my business meeting properly. I'm tired, I feel a little dirty, scummy. I want to be able to get to the other end, jump off that plane and be ready to go. The latent need was sleep. They didn't want the fancy food, the silver plateware, the great service. Yes, it's there, it's needed. But what they really wanted was sleep. So off the back of that became this product, which is now widely known as the flatbed in business. But no one really said that's what I wanted. I think it's important to keep that in mind. So the second picture relates to our challenge as an industry if we're in the management arena. In other words, we don't own our assets. Other people own our assets. We manage those hotels, those assets on behalf of the owners. So you can see here a picture of the GA, and that's what it feels like sometimes, honestly. We need to align the interests of various different parties. So when we start to look at major investments that are necessitated to support our mobile strategy and engagement, we have to have, in my case, the 14 different ownership groups all agree that the investment makes sense for them. And they're all in business for very different reasons. Some may be real estate investment trusts whose first obligation, rightly so, is the return to their stakeholders. Others may be personal owners of an asset because it's their personal asset, and they have a longer-term desire to see the asset grow. Airlines don't have this challenge, and there's a couple of airlines in the room, but airlines don't have a different owner for every aircraft. Can you imagine your world if you did in trying to get things done, just to put some context around it? Because of those challenges in aligning the group, we have to get ROI right, that third picture there on the mood board. It's not easy to do today. Some operational pieces, back of house, yes. But right up front in servicing, I'm sure with interactive chat, you guys have been able to work out how do you put an ROI on ancillary spend or upselling people, but there's obviously a lot more that goes into it that can't be measured as such today, directly.
Absolutely.
So that creates problems for investment. So today, we underinvest significantly as hoteliers. We absolutely do. And that's because of the problems that I mentioned earlier with aligning the different viewpoints of ownership groups. I think it's also the vendors in our industry actually are part of the challenge here in that they too are being too slow. And I'm sure a lot of people here are ready to put their hands up and go, not us, you know, we're there. But the major vendors and technology providers to our industry today are not moving quickly enough. The next is learning. You already did a great job explaining that. It's no different for us. We've got to learn. We have to learn quicker, and we have to learn across estate or levels within the estate. Which takes me lastly to the final point, which I've said at least 10 times and will continue to say, which is engagement and understanding consumer behaviour. So this last one is pretty key. I'm going to talk you through what I call the science of the Louis Vuitton handbag. Right? We don't have yet a department in many, many hotel brands or in the industry at large for behavioural scientists. People that spend time watching how people live. The psychology, bring it back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs and self-actualization right at the top there. What is it that people really need? Most people crave, they have their shelter, their food and water, we move up the pyramid, and we get to this point where actually recognition, right? It's been there, they want to celebrate this alter ego of themselves. And if I think about what in the luxury space are the products like Louis Vuitton, there's a reason why somebody still goes into a shop to buy a handbag. Does anybody know why? It's being able to walk out of the shop with the bag in the bag, right? That everybody else sees you walking out of the shop with the bag in the bag. And you feel great about yourself. So deep down inside, you want to say, I just dropped $2,000 on a bag. And you want everybody else to know that. Well, you're not going to have that relationship with a 12-inch distance, a small screen, a 2x4, or a little smartwatch. It's me and me. Good me, well done. So it's something we've got to be aware of because it's human nature. And that is one of the largest barriers to us in mobile that we've got to be able to get right. So moving swiftly towards the end of what I wanted to share is just the last points being disruption, innovation, and retrofitting. So there is a lot of disruption, we see that. You only have to go outside to see all of the different colleagues and pop-ups showcasing different solutions. It's brilliant, but there's this thing called being overwhelmed. I came back from ITB. I was one of those hands that came back on Friday night. And I walked through the tech hall. There was just one business after another, all trying to tackle one tiny sliver of my mobile needs. And lots of people running up to me saying, we'd love to talk to you. We need to talk to Viceroy. I said, I would love to talk to you, but I've got to work out the big picture to know where you fit in. And once I do have that in a place where I'm comfortable and where I know that I understand who my customer is at its core, and I can do the simple things brilliantly, ask for the business and be easy to do business with, then we can talk. Because otherwise all I'm doing is adding on another layer of complexity in my framework, and I probably won't execute particularly well in doing so. The retrofitting, let me just come back to that because I think that's an important point. You think about a lot of very, very successful companies who have used mobile. I'm going to use Uber and Lyft as two examples, okay? Their business was built around mobile. Mobile, they recognized as an opportunity for them to disrupt using a technology, using mobile, the device and technology and software. Our businesses are trying to retrofit this into what is a very traditional business. Therein is probably the largest challenge we face today. We are retrofitting. So we are behind, first and foremost. We've got to change that mindset. We can't knock down the walls and start again, but it is something that we've got to wrap our heads around. So as parting words, I'm going to just sort of focus on what I think are really three core pillars, not the previous pillars, but the pillars of what we can do next to be successful. The first is defining what engagement looks like. You can see there, and plan to make it happen. In our organisation, we're very proud of Franklin Covey and the wildly important goals. I'm not sure if any of you in this room follow that, but and for short, that's a WIG, not to be mixed up with Donald Trump. But if you think about WIGs, you've got to have one or two that you absolutely focus on and you're fanatical about and you make happen. And I think that applies to mobile more than anything else because it's such a busy world out there, and we're in the whirlwind of delivering great experience to customers, and they walk in front of us every single day. That takes us on our journey. So in order not to get caught up in that whirlwind, we've got to be very focused. The second is do those simple things brilliantly. Let's not get distracted by bright and shiny until we're getting the 101 right. And 101 is, do you know Amy? Do you really know her? Or are you reliant on your loyalty program to help you know a bit about Amy and only what she tells you and chooses to tell you? And then if she doesn't update it for 2 years, you sort of know Amy 2014, not 2016. So pick one or two and then win. Add value to the customer and your guest and win. And the third is implementing agile solutions. In other words, to those technology colleagues in the room, you have to help us to move quickly, which doesn't mean selling us just a solution. It means helping us understand how we integrate it into our ecosystem, working with our colleagues to train them, and continuing to move with us at pace. Because we can't afford to put a solution in and then wait 2 years for you to finish your roadmap for all the new things that we then needed, because our guest has no patience, because the rest of the world and the rest of the other industries that we look at, and I will put retail in there actually, are moving ahead at an incredible pace. And then lastly, curious minds. We have to always keep an open mind in hospitality, and it's probably one area where we've been challenged too, because we are a vocational industry. We love our pomp and ceremony for good reason, but we have to make sure that we're constantly open. Thank you very much.